While the Trump administration is tossing out regulations, here's a new one. Beginning this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission will begin requiring public companies to disclose and compare their CEO's pay with median employee pay. According to research published in the Wall Street Journal, those surveyed think the ideal ratio, top to bottom, from the big boss to the assembly line, is 7 to 1. The actual number is 300 to 1. And those polled say they could shun companies where the top dog is paid so much more than its employees, and they could favor companies where wages are more equitable. Consumers are also sensitive to gender pay inequality. Consumers who are Democrats are more passionate about it, and Republicans tend to be indifferent. What's the big picture on income inequality? Let's ask RT's Mr. Business, Boom Bust host Bart Chilton. Welcome.
Good to be here. Fantastic to be here.
I used to manage a union shop, a radio station here in Washington, where everybody got the same pay raise every contract. But in many workplaces, individual productivity is rewarded with structured incentives. If you can generalize, and maybe you can't, does one of those models tend to outperform the other?
Well, you want to incentivize people to do better. So if you're giving the same bonus to everybody every year, that certainly doesn't assist them in being motivated to do any better, because they're going to get the same thing. I mean, to me, it's always about trying to level the playing field for competition. I'm a big capitalist. I love capitalism. But capitalism has its faults, and the faults are that the wealthier people get, the more that continues. And we have seen, you gave a lot of interesting statistics, Holland, but we've seen back when I was 13 or so, back 1973. Since that time, we've seen the average worker hourly wages go up only 11%, while CEO pay, get this, has gone up 1,000%.
Yeah.
So the 300 to 1 is a big deal, but if you look over most of my life, you see that we've got a big problem, and part of that, I think, is due to sort of unfettered capitalism without some reasonable sideboards. And I think what the SEC is doing, to bring it back around to your opening, is trying to at least have it transparent, at least have people know what the circumstance. Then consumers can make the choice. Do I want to shop at this place? Do I want to shop at another place? Make their decision.
Well, in reading up on this, I've learned a new buzzword, the velocity of money.
Yeah.
Meaning how quickly that dollar bounces down on Main Street, USA. Wealthy people spend less of what they make, and they spend it more slowly than working stiffs who are scraping by. So by diverting dollars from the cash register to the stock market, do we throttle down the overall retail economy?
Yeah, you do. I mean, so the velocity of money, just to explain it a little bit more, is about how many times you can turn over a dollar. I used to tell a story, I don't know if I can recall it exactly in my speeches, about a woman that runs into a hotel and says, I want to rent the room for a night, but I want to see it first. And so the proprietor says, well, give me a deposit if you're going to go up in the room. I'll give it back to you if you don't do it. She runs upstairs to check out the room. He goes and pays the next door neighbor for something he owes. The next door neighbor goes across the street, then brings it back to a loan that the proprietor of the hotel had. And all of this money has changed hands. And the woman comes back down and says, I'm not going to stay at the hotel. Oops. But there's been all of this economic growth happening. Economies are moving.
Sure.
That's the velocity of money. And so if you give the money to people who just put it in a bank account and it sits there, or they just buy stocks, then it's not necessarily, although you could argue sometimes it'll help the company if you buy stocks, but if you're just parking your money, that doesn't help increase economic activity.
Right. Now, I've only got 30 seconds, but to your point, with the Trump tax changes came several notable employee bonuses. I think AT&T right out of the box and some others. But more recently, stock buybacks are in vogue. Prediction, when the dust settles, who's going to make out better, the haves or the have-nots?
Oh, the haves. I mean, Hunter, there's no question about it. They already are. We are at record stock buybacks in this country. And despite the fact that the Trump tax cuts were due to create jobs, et cetera, maybe a little bit of that has happened, Holland, and we don't have all the data yet. Here's what we do know. Some of the data shows we are record stock buybacks. That's helping the haves, not the have-nots, Holland.
So much for the trickle down. Thank you, Commissioner Bart Chilton. Boom Bust, weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on RT. Here's the landscape from the documentary Inequality for All by economist, professor, and former Labor Secretary Robert Reich.
Of all developed nations, the United States has the most unequal distribution of income and we're surging toward even greater inequality. The middle class is struggling. People occasionally say to me, what nation does it better? The answer is the United States. In the decades after World War II, the economy boomed, but you had very low inequality.